And Malaysia escape the middle-income trap? Malaysia is expected to transition from an upper middle income to a high-income country between 2024 and 2028, according to the World Bank. While Malaysia has long been a middle-income country, becoming a high-income country will demand collaborative systematic efforts on the part of all parties involved. As of 2021, a gross national income per capita of $12,695 is required to be categorized as a high-income country. Malaysia's gross national income is currently around $11,200, just $1,495 short of the current high-income threshold. Malaysia has been a middle-income country with slower productivity growth since the mid-1990s as it progressed through several stages of development. Prior to the COVID-19 epidemic, data showed that fourth quarter 2019 productivity growth per hour was 1.4%, which was much lower than previous quarters. A similar pattern was observed in employment productivity growth, which fell to 1.4% in the fourth quarter of 2019, from an average of 2.4% between the first and third quarters of 2019. This is exacerbated by the pandemic, which is expected to cause a 5.5% drop in labor output by 2020. In 2019, Malaysia outperformed Thailand, Indonesia, China, and Vietnam, with a productivity of $68,473. While Malaysia's productivity is higher than that of certain emerging markets, there is still room for it to catch up to more developed countries like South Korea and Japan. Malaysia's main competitive disadvantage in becoming a high-income economy is its lower rate of productivity growth. This is mostly due to concerns such as reallocating economic resources, restricted technology creation, the skills gap, the low female labor force participation rate, and structural labor market challenges. Let us discuss each of the elements that are crucial for Malaysia's development towards a high-income country. Reallocation of resources to high-end sectors at an early stage. Malaysia has redirected a large portion of its economic resources to the services industry, about 56% of total GDP. The manufacturing sector's contribution to the country's GDP, on the other hand, has fallen from an average of 32% in the 1990s to 22.5% in the last 5 years. It is crucial to highlight that the manufacturing sector's relative weight has decreased as a result of its relative dynamism in comparison to the services sector. This is not an indication of the manufacturing industry's global competitiveness. As a result, the significance of Malaysia's manufacturing sector should be reassessed, as it remains critical for the development of new productive knowledge and modern economic activities, particularly in the current era of Industrial Revolution 4.0. The manufacturing sector's value added has begun to drop as it progresses through the stages of development. As a result, the majority of economic resources have transferred to higher-end economic activity, such as the services industry. Similar events are typical in high-income economies as they quickly shift to a higher productivity economic sector by embracing technology. Malaysia, on the other hand, is experiencing it at a slower pace than most aspirational economies. The Malaysian government has recently emphasized transforming the local manufacturing sector to focus on high-value added and knowledge-intensive industries. The main focus is to shift from input-driven to productivity-driven growth to garner a higher contribution from total factor productivity. Achieving this will require developing an economy that relies heavily on skills, innovation and knowledge. New technology creation to provide further impetus. To achieve Malaysia's aspiration of becoming a high-income nation, acceleration in new technology creation should be given priority. Technology creation in Malaysia is mainly dependent on multinational corporations transferring their knowledge to local workers. However, this is not always the case. In fact, it is widely known that multinational corporations that operate in Malaysia prefer their own suppliers and have brought in expertise or labor from their home countries. These multinationals only outsource simple processes without any value add to local firms. They have less incentive to train and may only provide suboptimal training for local employees. This, in turn, creates limited productivity gains in the labor market. Malaysia is ranked 33rd as an innovative nation and the second most innovative middle-income country in the 2021 Innovation Index report. Malaysia is notable for being one of the world's top high-tech net exporters. Participation in research and development activities, on the other hand, remains moderate, as seen by its global ranking of 29th, down 2 places from 2019. This is also evident by the number of patent applications, which has remained low at 2,122 in 2019, significantly lesser than other regional countries such as China, 1,327,847, South Korea, 248,427, and Singapore, 7,354. Other factors that drive limited technology creation and diffusion is the lack of strong intellectual property, IP, environment. According to the International IP Index, Malaysia's overall score increased to 51.61% in 2020 from 51.24% in 2019. Nevertheless, over the past 9 years, Malaysia has improved its national IP environment, particularly for copyright protection. Malaysia's high-tech industry and exports grew significantly during the same time period. There is definitely potential for development, particularly in terms of commercialization and technological transfer, in our opinion. For innovation-based economies like Singapore, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Global Innovation Policy Center discovered that economic growth is closely correlated with a country's IP index. This is why Malaysia's intellectual property regime has to be strengthened. This may be accomplished by fostering a conducive environment for technology to flourish, while also incentivizing domestic enterprises to innovate at a faster pace. Prioritization should be given to patentability, license terms, IP rights enforcement, and small-middle enterprises' generation and use of IP assets based on the IP index's components. In the midst of the enormous disruption produced by Industrial Revolution 4.0, the World Bank recently predicted that up to two-thirds of all occupations in developing nations are vulnerable to automation. According to the World Economic Forum, over two-thirds of today's primary school pupils will work in jobs and businesses that do not exist today. As a result, it's critical to change the current economic trajectory and labor relations through innovation and technology, as well as rapid digital adoption. The pandemic has significantly boosted digital adoption among Malaysian businesses due to the various movement restrictions. Nevertheless, there is still room to improve digital adoption, especially for micro and small-middle enterprises. One of the biggest challenge for small-middle enterprises to adopt digitalization are financing, employee skillset and inadequate technology knowledge exposure. Government incentives and awareness efforts are critical in encouraging small-middle enterprises to embrace digital adoption. This involves pushing SMEs to use digitization for back-end activities like administration, data processing, and accounting, as well as focusing more on front-end business processes like e-commerce. Companies should invest in effective management and work procedures, as well as innovative machinery and technology and skilled employees. Structural challenges in the labor market. It is also critical for Malaysia to have a high-productivity labor market and a trained workforce in order to reach high-income status. However, common issues across all sectors, such as the income gap, skills gap, and industry structure, continue to hinder productivity gains. Issues such as the skills gap among local graduates, for example, are not new. They are the result of a mismatch between industry need and supply from institutions of higher learning as well as technical and vocational education and training. Along with that, the low creation of high-skilled jobs has lagged behind the supply of graduates. Bank Negara estimated that between 2010 and 2019, the share of high-skilled job creation in Malaysia declined to an average of 27% from about 51% in the previous decade. This corresponds to 86,200 employment gains per year. Meanwhile, the number of graduates in Malaysia has increased by an average of 151,000 persons over the same period. High-skilled jobs account for only around a quarter of all jobs in Malaysia, compared to more than half in the United States. Most industries in Malaysia's economy are still structurally at the bottom of the industrial value chain. Despite different incentives, the number of skilled employment created remains restricted. The over-reliance on low-cost labor has helped to maintain a labor-intensive economy by depressing wages and discouraging automation. Malaysia must take the necessary steps to create skilled jobs with higher productivity and pay in order to attract higher quality investments. As a result, the evaluation of foreign direct investment strategy should be prioritized and focused on high-end sectors that may contribute to stronger long-term growth and employment prospects. This must also take into account the quality of innovation, automation, new technology invention, and intellectual property commercialization. Despite the fact that women outperform men academically, Malaysian women have a lower female labor force participation rate than males. Female labor was 55.4% in 2020, while males was 80.6%, according to the Statistics Department. Housework has been mentioned by many women as the primary cause for their non-participation in the labor force. more economic and societal support for women is required, as well as greater economic prospects and fair competition for women through legal reforms. Huge number of foreign workers. Another barrier to productivity growth in Malaysia is the country's reliance on foreign labor. Because of the high demand for low-wage labor, the share of foreign workers has consistently increased since the 1990s. According to the Immigration Department, 2.3 million foreign workers accounted for 13.2% of Malaysia's overall labor force in 2019, excluding unlawful foreign employees. This is a major element stifling local wages and impeding the country's development toward being a high-productivity country. In terms of income, the Statistics Department reported that the mean monthly salaries and wages increased 4.4% in 2018. However, the absolute gap in the income share between the bottom 40% and top 20% household groups remains significant, as top 20 household earns almost 50% of total income in Malaysia. The country must raise the income and purchasing power of the bottom 40 household to reduce overall income inequality. As such, the implementation of various social assistance programs such as cash assistance to poor households should remain in place with further enhancements to close the income gap. It is important to note that successful high-income nations raise the average incomes and basic standard of living that every household can expect to achieve. Overall, transitioning from a middle income to a high-income country is a difficult endeavor. This could be due to a variety of circumstances, including a lack of resources, ineffective policies, and implementation challenges. Malaysia has significant obstacles as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, which could stymie the country's efforts to achieve high-income status. Malaysia will need to focus on reskilling and upskilling the local labor force in the post-pandemic environment in order to establish a more robust economy that can withstand future shocks. To break out of its middle-income trap, the government should increase digital use among local businesses and speed labor market reform.